Hey everybody, my name is Jay Gordon. Welcome back to the Azure Cosmos DB Global User Group. What do we do? We've been actually getting together a little bit more than once a month, and I'm taking a little pride in that because I'm finding more amazing people to do technology demonstrations for our community. Geez, I mean, this month we've got like 3 or 4. It's pretty amazing, and we've got some people who are actually Azure Cosmos DB PMs, program managers, product managers, people who are actually part of developing the software, the features, all the things that really help you get the most out of Azure Cosmos DB. So first and foremost, I want to just remind everybody, and this is important stuff, and so let me kill this music as much as I love. It's called lo-fi, and I love it. I always try to bring it in before we go, but I want to remind you, music going. Azure Cosmos 2025 CFP is out of code. I'm loving this music. It is my jam. But yeah, so long, robot. But yeah, we've got the Azure Cosmos DB 2025 CFP. I would love you to take part. It closes on February 25th. That's pretty close from now. So I want to make sure that you take part. Great. All right. So we've done the whole getting started thing. I've given you all the info. Do me a favor. I really want to hear where you're watching the show from today. So if you could drop in the chat where you're watching our show from today. I know I want to hear it. I know Saji, our guest, would love to know, because Saji's coming from a different part of the world than I am. Askia, who I'm about to bring up right now, you're in a different part of the world, not that much further, but you're in a different part of the world. How you doing today, Askia?
I'm great. Jay, how are you?
You know what? It's early.
Yeah.
I mean, comparative. It's a little earlier for you, and I know for our guest today, Saji, it's a little late, but you know what? We've all made the time for the people on the other side of the screen, and that's what's important, right? So I know you've got some things for the other people on the other side of the screen you want to talk to us about first.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that,
unfortunately,
Jay.
that is the last one. I am going to actually bring up this for you, and I'll just let you speak the intro, and I'll let you change that out after.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So one thing that we want to get across to everybody is our code of conduct. So we posted that in the chat. And basically what that says is that we seek to provide a respectful environment for all of our presenters. We definitely encourage engagement, but we ask that you be mindful of your commentary. Please be respectful and try to remain on topic if possible. We'll definitely share useful links throughout the chat, so keep an eye out for that. And we want to let you know that the session is going to be recorded. It will be available on demand. So if you have to leave early or you come late, you will be able to see the full thing. And that's going to be on the Microsoft Reactor YouTube channel. That should be ready in about 24 to 48 hours once the session concludes.
And you know what I love people to do, Askia, and you mentioned it before. I love them to ask questions. And I've got a person today that's going to have people asking all kinds of questions. And so, Askia, it was great. I'm going to see you on the other side. We'll talk at the end and just tell people how they can let us know more about how they felt about this session.
Definitely.
Wonderful. All right. I'll see you at the end of the show. Bye now. Now that we've gotten through some of the housekeeping, I've given you some of the things that you're going to do and that you can do. And one more thing that you can do. If you want to be on this show, if you want to present to your community, you can. Here's the link right there. I'm going to drop it in the chat. But I've got something really important to talk about today. And the person that's going to help lead that conversation is my friend Sajeet. Hi, Sajeet. How are you?
Hi, Jay. I'm doing great. How about you?
Good. You know, can I tell you some of the places people are actually watching from today? I think you'll love it. And then maybe you can talk about where you're watching from or you're broadcasting from. You're not watching, you're participating. Yeah. So we've got Pepso. They are coming from Bolivia. We've got Dejana from Luxembourg. Wow. Vikrant, they're out in India. Then we've got Andres from Montreal. Geez, I can't even imagine. It's cold here in New York City. I don't even want to know. We have Vishal from India. Hi, Vishal. And then we have Juhi from Dallas. So we got a nice spread. But Sajeet, tell us where you're coming from today.
I'm in part of Asia, in country called Sri Lanka. It's next to India. So I am in the same time zone as some of the audience who are watching today.
Great. Well, that means you're up late, and I apologize that you're up late. But I feel like the time that you're giving us today is some really, really helpful stuff. And I think, Sajeet, we're going to be doing this a few times over the next few months, aren't we?
That's right. So this is going to be a Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK series from beginners to experts. So we will be doing 4 episodes, starting from fundamentals to how to build your application as a production-ready application. So it's going to be 4 episodes, and today starting with the fundamentals. Yeah.
Fantastic. You know, I will admit it. I love that level 100 to 200 level content stuff, and then you can start bleeding into 300 because I don't really believe you can run until you've at least crawled first. And I feel like anybody who's written some software at one point in their life, they've had to crawl before they could start really running. And I think, Sajeet, you've got some stuff today that'll help people start running. But before we get that, I just want to learn a little bit about you. How'd you end up getting your start in technology and end up at Microsoft?
Yeah, I'm always passionate about computer science. Even in my academics, I used to participate in different conferences and also symposium. And then I participated in different coding concepts and so on. So at the age of 13, I wrote my first application, which won an award in the school days. And then from there onwards, like I kept on improving, learning something new on every day. And when I started my career, JavaScript was my passion. Till now, I have been a JavaScript developer. So even though I'm working in the product management, I make sure that I keep myself up to date with what are the things are coming on JavaScript. So that's one of my passionate area. And today we are going to talk about it. So I'm pretty excited. Yeah.
Fantastic. And so with that, Sajeet, I'm going to bring your presentation up. And while Sajeet is demonstrating, I want you to be sure that you ask questions. You can leave them in the chat. We'll address them as soon as we can. If Sajeet's in the middle of something, I don't want to interrupt. So we may get to your question at the end of the show. Also, if you want to follow along with some of the things today, Sajeet's put together this, or has shared with me this quick start he'd like you to go to. It's focused around JavaScript, TypeScript. And if you want to actually see the SDK that we're going to be talking about, here's a GitHub repo. I'm going to drop both of these in the chat so you can easily click. That being said, Sajeet, I'm going to give you the floor. I will keep myself engaged, and in case I have some questions, I may ask them. But until then, I want everybody to enjoy what he's got to share. And like I said, if you have questions, anything, just drop them in the chat. Sajeet, it's yours.
Hey, thanks, Jay. Welcome, everyone. Today's topic about Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. As I mentioned, the plan is to do 4 series of sessions starting from today's one. Today, we will be covering the fundamentals of JavaScript SDK for Cosmos DB. Before I start, I would like to introduce myself. I work as a product manager in the Azure Cosmos DB team, making sure that Cosmos DB is the best database for developers. I cover multiple areas on the dev experience and also SDK, as I mentioned, JavaScript SDK, which includes multiple features as well, so including GraphQL and things like that. If you want to discuss about anything about Azure Cosmos DB or developer experience, feel free to ping me or reach out to me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I will be happy to take your questions and answer them. Yeah, my web address is here and also my Twitter handle is here. With that, we can get started. I always want to keep the session interactive. So answer this question on the chat. It will make me to understand the audience for today and set the context. If you're a front-end developer, I'm sure being a JavaScript developer, you must be doing some front-end. So answer it as front-end developer. If you're a back-end developer, just mention as back-end developer. If you're a Node back-end developer, just highlight that. If you're a cloud developer, definitely you must be working across multiple languages. And today we will be fundamentally focusing on JavaScript. And if you're not a developer, you're welcome to watch this episode because we will be covering some fundamentals of Cosmos DB before we dive into the JavaScript SDK. I hope we are getting some answers on the chat. With that, let me get started with today's goal. So in each of my session, I tend to set the goals. Today, we are going to write a JavaScript application which talks to Cosmos DB within 3 minutes. So that's the aim for this particular session. I will guide you to how to get started and also to write the application from the scratch so that you can explore yourself and start writing your application. Feel free to ask questions on the chat. It could be anything related to the session that I'm covering, or it could be anything related to Azure Cosmos DB. All right, as a developer, I have been through this struggle, right? I'm sure like most of you would have gone this through this struggle. As developers, we want simplicity, speed, and scalability without worrying much about how you write the code, right? So it's always about without spending much hours on coding, how to be more productive, how to build the right application. As a developer, if you are facing any of those, if you're not facing any of those listed here, then you are a perfect developer. But throughout my career, I have seen all these issues as part of my development process. It could be choosing the right database, or it could be choosing the right SDK or language to make the program working with that particular database. And then I have come across so many complex SDKs in order to make life difficult for developers to understand that, right? So we are going to all solve all these problems through Azure Cosmos DB and also through JavaScript SDK. If you have to talk about Azure Cosmos DB and JavaScript SDK, JavaScript has been the go-to language for developers over the years, right? Even if you see the Stack Overflow survey, even the state of languages survey, you can see JavaScript being the #1 language, which means everyday developers are adapting or writing applications with JavaScript to talk to some of the databases. And how you're going to write scalable, distributed application with the backend that supports all your customer scenarios is something that we are going to talk about today. Before I dive into SDK, let me talk about Azure Cosmos DB through a developer lens. You might have already heard about Azure Cosmos DB, but today we will be covering what it offers to developers in order to make it more productive. As you might know, Azure Cosmos DB is a managed service, so that's a no-brainer, and it can be attractive for developers. And Cosmos DB supports multi-models, including documents, key value, graph, column family. So it is interesting for developers to build a lot of applications in a lot of scenarios. And if you are a developer who is already using OSS APIs such as Mongo, Cassandra, you can get started easily by writing a code where you need to just change the connection string. You can still make your application work with Cosmos DB, which explore a way to transfer your solution from IaaS to a PaaS with no or low minimal code changes. The other thing from a developer standpoint is that Cosmos DB being schema agnostic, you don't have to worry about how to structure your data when you're thinking of relational databases, right? Which make it attractive for developers, and you get the data response in a JSON format. That is what typically web developers deal with. Some of the service fundamentals, which as such as global distribution, multi-master, which helps the developers out of the box to replicate and also handle the concurrency, and some other common features such as scale, consistency, and indexing, which comes out of the box, which provides a lot of developer scenarios unblocked easily. And availability is something that I don't have to talk about. If you're building any application to customers, availability is something that you need to care about. We are giving finance of SLA, which I don't think any other database gives. So Cosmos DB provides finance of SLA, where you don't have to worry about the underlying infrastructure. You can just focus on the code which you provide to customers. And data security becomes a priority for application developers. So Cosmos DB supports encryption in multiple ways, and also we supports managed identity in the form of RBAC, where you can use Azure managed identity when you're building applications with other resources on Azure as well. And also it covers some of the security scenarios using CMK and so on. And other cool feature is that NoSQL API supports querying the items using structured query language. So if you're coming from SQL background, you can write SQL syntax like queries to obtain data from your backend. Also the capability to have stored procedures, triggers, functions, which is like typical day-to-day language like developers deal about. So you can write your functions, you can write your user-defined functions, also stored procedures if you're already dealing with in your day-to-day applications. And from a developer standpoint, we support REST and GraphQL, which makes it easier to expose APIs on top of Azure Cosmos DB. Recently, we added some of the native AI capabilities, which you might have already watched in some of the episodes. So Azure Cosmos DB supports native vector search, and also we introduce full uh, full text support and also hybrid search support with Ignite announcement. So you can watch those episodes to understand how these can be embedded within Cosmos DB. And obviously, Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK supports all these scenarios. I hope this gives an idea about what Cosmos DB is all about through developer lens. Let's jump into ways to access Cosmos DB right. So there are multiple ways to access Cosmos DB. As I mentioned, we support multiple languages. If you talk about .NET, Java, Python, and JavaScript, and also Golang, we have all the SDKs available for you to talk to Cosmos DB. And also we support, there are several ways like you can invoke through REST, GraphQL, and also we support several developer tooling such as emulator, VS Code extension to interact with Cosmos DB. Today's topic is about JavaScript. So I will talk about how you can leverage JavaScript SDK in order to interact with Cosmos DB. When it comes to developer experience, SDKs comes the first priority, right? The story that I talked about, the issues that I faced as a developer or you as a developer, SDKs becomes the first priority. As well as you know, SDK provides a simplified integration, efficient development, and also abstracts the platform complexities. Like you don't have to understand how the things work behind the scenes, right? So SDK abstracts all that and giving you the flexibility to code in whatever the way you want to write. So this is probably the most complete developer experience slide for JavaScript developers on Cosmos DB, and why you need to choose Azure JavaScript, Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK for your development scenarios. The first factor is all about open source. So Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK is open source. So any feature that we are driving is based through feedback driven, right? So if you are a JavaScript developer and if you would like to give a feedback about our SDK, you can go to this particular GitHub repo where I'm for highlighting. So we have open source everything, even the discussions, even the issues, and what are the items that we are working on. You can see the next release is going to be 4.3.0, where you can see what are the items that we have prioritized. So if you feel that there are certain items not prioritized, you can create an issue or an ask on the GitHub discussion, or you can create an issue tagging Cosmos in the GitHub repo, and then I will be the person who would be responsible to take that and provide the right response. So we are taking the fact that is the development is driven through open source community, and we are following some of the open source best practices. even the releases, there is a release timeline, and also we manage release tags to make sure that community is aware about what we are working on. As I mentioned, project management is via GitHub, so feel free to raise concerns if you have any features that is missing or that needs to be prioritized. And again, any SDK has to be fluent. So we are following the best practices within Microsoft from the central team. There are standards driven. So we have followed the Fluent API design in order to make developer experience better with simplified syntax and also async iterators, which is one of the common way to write JavaScript coding. And we have published any features that we announce. There will be a sample attached to it. You can explore that through Azure Cosmos DB, JS SDK. I can just navigate to that just to show. If you're a beginner, that's a good place to see samples. So if you go to Azure Cosmos DB, SDKs, and then if you go under Cosmos DB, yeah, feel free to raise questions if you have any questions as well. So it could be fundamental or it could be anything related to the topic that I'm talking about. So you can see there's a folder called samples dev. So this talks about any feature that we introduce with Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. So if you're introducing vector search, for example, there will be a sample attached to it when we release the SDK as well. So that is one of the easiest way for developers to understand how things work. And then enhanced developer experience, you can easily set up with npm install. I will show a quick demo to how to set up as well, and then user-friendly methods. So any feature that we introduce, it aligns with the naming standards, so you can easily, understand how to use that feature. And obviously, it highlights the benefits of TypeScript. So any feature that we announced in JavaScript SDK, we make sure that it works with TypeScript, and also the samples are published with TypeScript as well. And also we solve the user-centric design challenges. So we have approached hybrid model in order to support some of the native features when it comes to JavaScript. So recently we have introduced some of the features that helps JavaScript developers to be more productive, starting with diagnostics. So you can understand how a particular request transition from your client machine to the server, and then you can see what track it has been taken through. It could be network, it could be the server, it could be from the server back to the client. So you can see how much time it has taken and so on. So you can enable diagnostic, and also we have introduced a new bulk API which will be announced in 4.3, which will make the developers to insert million documents at one go through the JavaScript SDKs. This hasn't been there, so developers can leverage this feature. And there are much more features which we have announced. I will dive into each of them in the upcoming slides. And also we have a session particularly to talk about best practices and also the features that we announced. If you're wondering, okay, what are the customers using Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK? I don't want to highlight the external customers. You can obviously see major Azure Cosmos DB customers leverage JavaScript SDK, but I want to highlight some of the internal tools which you use on daily basis uses Azure JavaScript SDK. One is the Azure Cosmos DB Explorer. So if you go to Azure Cosmos DB Data Explorer, and if you're viewing any of the documents or if you're doing any operations within the Data Explorer, it is driven through Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. And the second one is Azure Cosmos DB Emulator. Again, the same thing. If you open the Data Explorer through Emulator, it is driven through JavaScript SDK. And the third is VS Code extension. So if you're using Azure Cosmos DB VS Code extension, again, it uses the Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. And there are wonderful community packages. Again, Nest.js Azure Database is a package that some of the developers use. If you're familiar with ORM-driven development, it supports some of the features natively. So Azure Databases Nest.js extension uses Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. And then there is another VS Code extension called NoSQL Studio, which is built by one of the MVPs, which is also widely used, uses Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. And Hasura, which is one of the open source GraphQL provider, uses Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK to translate GraphQL queries into queries that can be understood by Cosmos DB. So these are some of the community packages which uses Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. I want to highlight that, and with that, I want to also talk about how this JavaScript SDK has evolved through the period of years, right? So back in 2019, it was introduced as Document DB. It's the package called Document DB, which supports basic CRUD operations and some consistency level, some form of query metrics. And then in 2020, we deprecated this package. We introduced V2, which supported certain Cosmos DB native features such as geo distribution. How do you set up multi-region? How do you improve query performance and so on? I would call V3 was the major breakthrough of the JavaScript SDK, which was introduced again in 2020, which improved a lot of improvements on the JavaScript SDK from the way that you initialize the Cosmos client to simplified syntax. And we also transitioned from callback to promises, which made easier for developers to write code when you're building JavaScript application. And then last year, back in 2023, we introduced V4 SDK, which is still in preview, but we are thinking to make it GA, given that most of the customers have moved to V4 because of the fact that it supports most of the features which you might see in other SDKs like .NET Java, starting from request diagnostics, change feed, and then native vectors AI capabilities. And then we have already also introduced new bulk API, which aligns with some of the other Cosmos SDK. So this is how the SDK has transitioned, which shows that we have consistently invested in the JavaScript SDK, also made sure that the performance through the JavaScript SDK has been improved over the years. And still, there are a lot more improvements to be done. We are waiting to hear feedback from developers like you. So try it out and give feedback. With that, I also wanted to talk about how things work behind the scenes, right? That is one of the important things as a developer you need to understand. Again, I will not dive into detail, but whenever you create a Cosmos DB account, you know that there are 4 replicas, right? And whenever SDK is initialized, the way it talks to the backend is through those replicas. So there are 2 connectivity modes that we support on our SDKs. One is the direct mode that Java and .NET supports, and then the gateway mode, which is supported by Python and also JavaScript. If you want to understand how this works, whenever a client issue a request to through the SDKs, which is through the HTTP call, that talks to the gateway endpoint, which is kind of a middleware that we have, which initially invokes certain requests to identify where this particular account belongs to, what is the what is the database that you want to talk to, what is the container that you want to talk to. So it fetches those information and then it caches within the SDK. And whenever you issue the next request to talk to the, for example, if you want to get certain items from the backend, it issues those from the cache. It identifies, okay, which particular address it needs to talk to. It fetches the information and then issue the query and then respond back to the client. So those requests are made through TCP calls. Again, this is called as the gateway SDK because of the fact that there is a middleware between the physical replicas and the server, right? So that's the main difference between the direct connectivity mode and the gateway mode. Again, when you consider gateway SDKs, this is how the communication is made to the backend to get the information back to the client. I will dive in details about how this implementation is working in the best practices, but for the fundamental session, this is good enough to understand how the communication is made from the client to SDK to the backend, right? And if you want to understand more about the connectivity modes, you can go through this link. And if you have to talk about key features that are supported through JavaScript SDK, it's no-brainer. Again, we support CRUD operations, which you typically do with any database as application developer. And then we also support bulk operations, so you can ingest data in bulk. You can also do bulk deletion. the experience that you see on portal when you select multiple items on the portal, and then if you want to do a bulk delete, that is driven through JavaScript SDK. And if you want to understand how real-time data changes happens, then you can use the change feed feature, which we introduced again in 4.0. It listens to the document changes, and then you can build certain application scenarios which talk about notification, right, and things like that. And then again, JavaScript SDK supports managed identity, where you can certainly use with some of the managed resources on Azure, along with Cosmos DB using managed identity. Again, it supports RBAC. If you want to restrict certain operations to certain users, those can be configurable through the RBAC, and then you can use those roles in the JavaScript SDK. Again, when we don't have integrations with some of the partner Azure services, the SDK doesn't make full sense, right? So we have integrated with Azure Functions, Logic Apps, and some of the other services, and also open source frameworks, which I talked about, Hustler Connector, and also Versal, Netlify. All these integrations are in place if you want to try out Cosmos DB on those platforms. So we want to meet developers where they're at. So all these integrations are available for you. You can try it out. And finally, as a developer, I want to spend more time in writing coding. So you can certainly use diagnostic support, by enabling diagnostic in order to understand, say, when you're stuck in particular issues and how throttling happens, how one particular request is throwing 500 and so on, whether it's from the client or from the server. Without wasting time, you can enable diagnostics and then go through the request tracking and then understand more about it. Okay, with that, I think we have come to the core part of this session, how to get started with Azure Cosmos DB SDK. Again, as a Node developer, you need to have this fundamental knowledge. You need Node.js installed, that is obvious. And then you need to have the Azure Cosmos DB account. If you are a student, if you are a developer who don't have, Azure Cosmos DB account, don't worry. You can use the Azure Cosmos DB emulator, which provides the local developer experience. So you can spin up a Azure Cosmos DB emulator on Windows as well as Linux within quick time. Again, I'm the PM for emulator. If you have any feedback, feel free to open an issue on GitHub as well. So we are waiting to hear feedback from emulator customers. And also we introduced a new emulator which works on Mac M1, which has been a long pending issue from the customer. So feel free to provide feedback on emulator. So if you don't have an Azure Cosmos DB account, you can start with emulator. And then the third is the VS Code. Obviously, if you are a JavaScript developer, you must be a fan of VS Code extension, right? Extension and also obviously VS Code. So you need to have VS Code in order to develop this particular application. Even if you don't have VS Code, we are going to use the browser environment, which is the code spaces environment. Again, if you just have the GitHub repo, that should be good enough to do this particular exercise. Again, as I mentioned, this particular JavaScript SDK is available in GitHub repo. You can go to Azure JavaScript, Azure JS SDK, and then under that you can go to the SDK folder, Cosmos, and then you can see the SDK. And then again, it's available in NPM as well. Again, I have opened it, so you can see it is published in NPM. You can see the downloads. You can see what is the latest version, and how many customers are using which versions and so on. And then the getting started document if you are very new to Cosmos DB. All right, those are the prerequisites which are needed. I will explain for 4 fundamental steps in order to get started with JavaScript SDK. First, you have to do npm install Azure Cosmos. That is typically you do with any JavaScript application, and then you need to create a client. Again, this is also common with any SDK or database that you are talking to. So which requires this package, Azure Cosmos, and then you need to provide the connection string. There are 2 ways to do it. So new Cosmos client support connection string as well as URI and the key, which you can obtain from the portal. I'm sure like most of you are aware of the portal experience. So you can get it from the portal, from the Data Explorer. If you go to settings and then keys, you can obtain your connection string as well as the key. And then you need to create a container and database. So basically, we support two SDKs to provide this feature. There is one is called Azure Resource Manager SDK. Again, it comes in JavaScript. We recommend customers to use the Resource Management SDK to do any control plane operations. For example, creating container, creating a database, setting throughput, and so on. And if you want to do data plane operation, you have to use the data plane SDK, which is the Azure Cosmos SDK. In this case, I'm going to do a full-fledged demo. So I'm using the same SDK to do the container creation. Again, it does automatically validate whether the container already exists or if the database exists. Those are some of the improvements that we have done in order to make the developer experience better. And then this is how you issue a query in order to get one particular item from the database, right? So this is how the initial development would get started if you are a developer. Yeah. With that, let me see if there are any questions on the chat. Do we have any questions, Jay? Are you able to follow me? All right. I hope there are no questions. Moving on, let's build a to-do app. That's the purpose of this session, right? So I'm going to do a demo in order to build a JavaScript application that talks to Cosmos DB. Just making sure that you are following. Not sure, something wrong. Sure.
Hi, Saji. I think StreamYard had an issue.
I see.
Can you bring up your share again? We can get back into it. My whole session collapsed. Sorry, everybody. That technical problems occur. Hopefully, it won't last too long. Saji, are you able to reshare your screen?
Give me a second. Not able to share this.
Sorry, everybody. I really do apologize. Unfortunately, technology happens. Things happen. But while we are waiting, and I want to remind you all, and I'm going to tell you all to do this again. All right. This platform is acting very bizarre right now, unfortunately. We, I think, have lost the G. Sorry about that. We may have to end a little early today if we're not able to get the G back. Askia,
I'm here.
I'm going to ask you to come. Yeah, unfortunately, it seems like Sajeet's session locked up. I think our provider had some issues today, which is unfortunate. We're going to give Sajeet a second, but I want to remind you all that we try to do this all the time as far as the reactor is concerned, and we need your help to be part. So please fill out our global user group submission. You're able to do a session just like this. We would love to have you a part. I'm going to go ahead and drop in the comments the actual. There you go. Oh, his internet was fine, Andrew. I lost access. So I think we all had the problem. Unfortunately, it was something with our provider that gives us the studio. So we're gonna give Sajeet another minute. But until we do, like I said, I want to remind everybody that you can be part of this. I've gone ahead and dropped the banner, or I should say the link into the chat. I feel like we're going to have to, unfortunately, end a little early. I know that's a real bummer. We're going to have another one of these, and maybe Sajeet and his next session could kind of build in what we were talking about in the next one. Let me see if he's gotten in touch with me. No. Okay. So, yep, I think we're going to we're going to stop right now. Askia, do you want to close us out?
Yeah. Sorry, everyone, but tech happens. One thing they asked us to plug is the upcoming Microsoft AI tour.
Wait.
Was he back? All right.
Look who we got back. You can keep going about the AI tour. Yeah.
So
AI all right, everybody. This is what happens when you demo live.
AI tour is coming up, so you can see the cities on the screen. So if you are close or going to be in one of those cities, feel free to check it out. I'm not sure why Seattle is not on there, but anything is possible. So just stay tuned. It's a good reason to tune in. So with that said, I will hand it back and let Sajeet finish his excellent presentation.
Sajeet, thank you for being patient.
Hey, thanks, Jay and Askia. Let me continue. I think, this is the place we stopped. Again, thank you. All right, I'm going to build a to-do app within 3 minutes using the things which I talked about, like using Azure JavaScript SDK for Cosmos DB. So you can access the particular demo using this particular link as well. It has a set of instructions which you can go through step by step to set it on your environment. I will be driving that on my end. You can also follow based on what are the steps that I'm doing. So this repo is available on GitHub. You can access it from the instructions that I already shared. So I will be using the code spaces environment, which is one of the cool features that developers love about, right? So if you're a JavaScript developers, you must be already using VS Code. Again, you get this option under the repository for any repository that you create on GitHub. You will see this option called create code space on what are the branch that you're currently in. So I have opened up a repo in a new code space environment, which might take a couple of minutes to set up the dependencies. I had it open before everything got crashed, but it might take a couple of minutes to set up the dependencies, to set up the project in the browser. And before that, I will talk about the structure of this project, right? So I have a front-end app, Angular, being an which is one of the widely used framework. I have the fundamental setup here, which you don't have to do. You can take this clone of this particular repo, which consists with the model. Again, we are going to build a to-do app, which comes with task model, and then you can see the routes defined, but we will be defining the routes as we go through the application. And then the front-end app consists of just a box. If it's done, if it's not done, then it will be just empty. And then you can also apply a filter based on the status of the to-do item. So that's the fundamental goal of this application. This particular application is loading. With that, I can just go to the Azure Cosmos DB container. Again, probably I need to zoom out because things got crashed in order to make it visible for everyone. All right. Yeah, so this is the workshop which you can navigate from the link that I shared on the slide. Again, it talks about what are the services that we are going to use. You need to have a GitHub account, you need to have Azure Cosmos DB account, and then the web browser and some JavaScript knowledge, which you might have already got in this particular session. And then you need to clone this repo, so you can just navigate to the repo which I talked about, and then create code spaces on the main branch. That's it. Given that GitHub is free, and also we are going to leverage one of the coolest feature GitHub Copilot in order to make the developer experience with Azure Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. Without Copilot, you can, I mean, with Copilot, you can certainly improve the developer experience and also be more productive. Yeah, by this time it gets set up, let me try to navigate to the portal and show the
Hi, unfortunately, it looks like our
yeah, I think I
technical-
had some issues with the stream.
Yeah, Sajid, I think what we can do, we can boot and try to run this through because I know that we're running short on time. It's totally up to you, but unfortunately, we've been running into some issues that I think are beyond you and I today.
Yeah, I can complete the demo. Probably it will take another 5 minutes, so that.
Okay, great. Sorry, everybody. We'll do what we can.
Yep, sure.
All right, why don't you bring back your presentation and we'll keep going. Sorry, everybody.
All right. Yep. I just wanted to highlight I will be using this to-do container and a to-do database, which I have already created in Cosmos DB. And then I'm going to use the GitHub Copilot to write the application using the JavaScript SDK, right? As I mentioned, the first step is to, we have the client and the server application. So I'm just going to navigate to CD packages server. And then I'm going to do the first step, npm install at Azure Cosmos latest. So this is going to install the latest version of the Cosmos DB JavaScript SDK. You can see it's done. The next step is to write the logic. I'm going to write that in a new file called db.ts. So I'm going to create a new service. Let me zoom out this a bit.
Yeah, you may want to
it's visible to
actually.
everyone.
Yeah, it's a little tiny.
You can see the. Yep.
A little bit better now. Yeah.
All right. Let me create a new service called db.ts. And then I'm going to type as the first step. So I have installed the package. I have installed the dependencies which I needed to build the application. The first step is to type, from Git, you can obviously create a new client, but I'm going to leverage a GitHub Copilot. So you just need to provide, say import Azure Cosmos SDK and the task model. So here it will automatically import the Cosmos client from the Azure Cosmos package, which we have already installed as the dependencies, and also it identified, okay, what model we are going to use. So it's going to import from the task, which already have it under models folder, right? task.ts. So we have the fundamental setup as needed. The next step is to write the logic in order to talk to Cosmos DB and do what are the CRUD operations. So I'm going to create a DB service class to wrap the Cosmos DB SDK with URI and a key from an environment variable connecting to those database and task container. So it is going to write the code automatically for me. You can see that it has automatically generated certain part of code, which I need to comment this part. So you can see it uses the JavaScript SDK with a certain set of queries that we support. And then it performs read, it performs get all tasks, it performs delete, and so on. So as a developer, this is the first step. You need to create a client. You need to instantiate the client using the URI and the key. And then you have to provide which database you need to talk to, which container. And then you can see a set of operations that are automatically populated, right? So again, it throws certain error because the environment variables need to be set. So I want to make sure that environment variables are set. Check whether environment variables are set. So this is going to add a validation to make sure that environment variables are set, and then it's going to return a set of tasks and so on. So probably you might get into some errors, but again, it complains the type of object that we are returning doesn't match with the definition. Certainly you can fix that using the Copilot. So again, the way you write code depend on the type or the style that you choose. So in this case, based on the suggestion, I'm going ahead and fix those issues as well. So my fundamental things are sorted. I already created an environment variable in the GitHub code spaces environment. So you can see under secrets and variables, I have code spaces, I have Cosmos endpoint and Cosmos key. I'm going to replace this with this particular. So I have the Cosmos endpoint and then the key variables. So this makes sure that it reads the environment variable and those environment variables are accessed from the code. So right now we have a simple app which does all the CRUD operations. Now I need to expose this as API. So I will go to index.ts. Before that, we also have a common recommendation to create a singleton service in order to make the performance of the application better. I will talk about in the best practices, but in this application, in order to make it singleton, I'm going to write, say, instantiate DB service to singleton and get the class, get that instance. So this will create a singleton instance of the DB service. Okay. And then sorry about it. I think we have 5 more minutes. I would be able to. So this is going to return a single class instance whenever you want to invoke method in this particular file. So that's the purpose of singleton class. Right now, I'm going to return the objects from the controller, right? So whenever user access this particular URL, it's going to return the task. So await, and then I have to invert the DB service, get that instance, and then read task. So it is going to return all the task. And again, with the for creating a task, you have to create await DB service, create task, and then to get a task, you have to do await DB service dot get instance read task ID, and then again here also you need to do await DB service get instance read task, which will return the task, and then I need to return that. Sorry, I just need to update the task. So in this case, we are going to update, and finally we are going to do a delete await DB service get instance delete task. So this is going to do all the CRUD operations with the logic that I have written. Fundamentally, if you want to make some modifications, say I want to return task based on the user ID, then I can just command read task based on given user ID. So for example, this is the parameter. And it's going to rewrite the code. And then you can also see the query, which is automatically populated by passing user ID as a parameter. So I will remove this and also modify the read task where I think it's here. So read task, which is going to get user ID as a parameter. Read task, user ID. So right now we have the entire application. So it says, so I need to return the list of tasks. So let me fix that. All right. I think we are good with everything. Let me run this. So in order to run, I can just do, I will go to the client and then do a npm run dev, which will start both applications in browser, like the front end, which is the Angular application, and then the back end, the Express.js. So you can see that Express.js already started in port 3000, which you can open in browser. And then we also have the Angular application, which again generate the bundle with the dependencies, which will spin up in a couple of minutes. So the fundamental understanding here is we are going to leverage the JavaScript SDK, create a singleton DB service, which does certain task automatically to get, to delete, to update, to insert. So we have the application running. Let's see if the application loads. We have 2 more minutes. I think we are good on time. So the application loads. Do a session on JavaScript. All right, it got inserted as well. So, and then session done. Go for a coffee with Jay. right now, you can see I have marked it as done, which
I could use a
still I have
coffee
to
right
do.
now, Sajid.
Thank you. Yeah, let's say if I want to filter, I can just mark it as active. Or so all this logic is driven through the application, which I built in like 3 minutes. If we didn't had that interruption, probably I would have done it earlier. But this is a fundamental understanding. With a simple npm install, I was able to spin up a JavaScript into an application, which with the front end in quick time. So this is what I wanted to cover. Before I close, there are certain best practices. I will separately do a best practices session. So you always make sure to have the app in the same region where your application Cosmos DB account is created, and also use the latest version of the SDK. As I mentioned during the session, use a single instance of the Cosmos client, and also enable diagnostic logging. So these are some of the best practices as a beginner to follow. I will dive into each of these in the upcoming episodes. As a next step, I would highly encourage you to try the JavaScript SDK and create issues under the tag Cosmos. We always value feedback, so I have created a new survey where you can provide feedback for the JavaScript SDK team to improve and also to build new things on the JavaScript SDK. Again, join the episode with Jay to talk more about best practices with JavaScript SDK. And if you have feedback or questions, you can always reach out to this particular alias. With that, I think with some interruption, we have come to the end of this episode. Thanks for being a wonderful audience, and thanks Jay and Askia for hosting. Yeah.
No problem. You know what, Sajid, maybe it'll be worth it for you to just record the demo, and we'll make sure everybody will have just the demo section. So the worst part of all this today is you were so good and deep in, and it just like outside of our hands. That's the world of technology. As someone once said, everything fails all the time, always. When it comes to tech, it's about being prepared for when failure happens. Anyhow, but you didn't fail. What we were using failed on us. Anyhow, Askia, I know you've got some things to actually, that is the wrong one. Why don't you skip to the next slide? There we go. I know.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, Jason, I had to cut you off. Yeah, basically, we are always open and looking for feedback. So we have put the feedback slide on the screen. Apologize for the tech issues today. But when you fill out the slide, the most important thing is just to reference today's event code, which is 24869. Once again, that is 24869. And I am putting the link to the AI tour that we talked about previously in the chat. So if you want any more information about that, go ahead and click on that link, and that will give you all the details.
Fabulous. Well, I think we've come to the end of our show today. If you'd like to go to the AI tour, I was at the stop here in New York City. It was great. You'll get to meet lots of people. You'll see amazing sessions from all sorts of people. So definitely check it out. But I think we've done checking out this session today, and we're ready to sign off. So that being said, I want to go ahead and say goodbye to everybody. We're going to give you the big wave goodbye. Keep an eye on Sajid's social feed for maybe an updated version of this particular talk. We hope we can get you one that has a little bit less breakups. But Sajid, thank you so much for being part today. I know we'll see you again next month. We'll start planning that. We'll get it scheduled. You all will know. But until we get to next month, I want to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you for being part. And we look forward to a less technical interrupted session next time. I know we got some more stuff planned for you. Keep your eyes open. All right, everybody. Let's give them the big wave goodbye. We'll catch you next time. Bye, everybody.